Apa itu SMART satu tujuan? Let me show you. Yes, dibaca SMART satu tujuan, bukan 171, bukan plat nomor, ataupun kode OTP. SMART merujuk pada Solidarity Muslim for Al-Quds Retaken, dan satu tujuan diambil dari Al-Quran surah 17 ayat 1 tentang disebutkannya Masjidil Aqsa dalam perjalanan Isra Mi'raj Rasulullah. SMART satu tujuan banyak sekali melakukan kegiatan yang melibatkan anak muda, mulai dari skala kecil di kampus, kelas online, podcast tentang Palestina, event olahraga, sampai event skala nasional dan internasional. Selain itu, kita juga berisik, like literally berisik. Dengan kampanye kreatif baik berisik, kita sadarkan pemuda seluruh Indonesia untuk terus bergerak mendukung kemerdekaan Palestina, baik secara online maupun kegiatan-kegiatan offline. Saat ini, ribuan pemuda dari berbagai daerah di Indonesia telah tergabung ke dalam komunitas baik berisik dan terus bergerak secara masif. Dengan lantang mereka berkata, saat Palestina terusik, jangan hanya berbisik, kita harus berisik. Dari program kampanye ini, SMART satu tujuan mendapatkan penghargaan Best Program pada konferensi Global Women's Coalition for Al-Quds and Palestine tahun 2022 di Turki. SMART Camp, salah satu program paling seru karena just try it yourself. Saking pentingnya berjejaring, kita adakan juga media gathering agar semua media bisa bertemu dan membahas soal isu Palestina di ranah media. Itulah SMART satu tujuan. Dari ayat inspiratif hingga ke aksi kolektif. SMART satu tujuan. Educate, connect, impact.
Kok lu nggak main HP sih?
Kuota gua habis, coba dong.
Wah, sayang banget. Padahal Smart udah launching website baru loh. Nih, bisa langsung donasi di sini. Update berita terbaru juga ada. Macam-macam dah pokoknya seputar tentang Palestina gitu.
Keren. Tapi bagi hotspot dong.
Betul, makanya jangan lupa kunjungi website Smart ya.
Oke, tapi bagi hotspot.
Untuk memperjuangkannya, kita butuh ilmu. Namun, tak semua berkesempatan mendapatkan dan membaca setumpuk referensi kepalestinaan. Juga, tak semua bisa bertemu para narasumber ahli, pejuang di garis depan, sampai aktivis internasional. Karena itu, kami berupaya menghadirkannya untukmu, agar kita bisa sama-sama belajar, memahami, mencintai, dan memperjuangkan Palestina.
Apa itu SMART satu tujuan? Let me show you. Yes, dibaca SMART satu tujuan, bukan 171, bukan plat nomor, ataupun kode OTP. SMART merujuk pada solidaritas.
are people who are actually aiding Israel in its occupation, in its oppression of Palestinian people. So you start reaching out and find, bit by bit, I had several experiences by which I was able to get into some of these politicians, and I was amazed how they tell you something in private and completely the opposite in public. I had the head of the International Relations Committee at the time. I mean, he was in public extremely pro-Israel, but in private so anti-Semitic. I was stunned, and he thought that because I oppose Israel vehemently that somehow I'm anti-Jewish. But the way he talked, and then he told me, why should the Palestinians have a state? They should have a state. This was a Republican, very well known from Chicago, Henry Hyde. Then he tells me next year I'm become the chairman of the International Relations Committee. And then once he became the chairman, he was totally opposed to the Palestinian state, and he was doing all this. It's all about power. So you find out that this is also not about awareness, but also about power and the balance of power between two communities, one that is totally disenfranchised and one that has all the levels of power.
We have two irreconcilable positions here. On one hand, the Israelis want the release of the captives without really committing to much. But the ending of the war is a new variable here that Trump is trying to insist on. Whether he sticks to it or not is the really big question. On the other hand, the resistance of much of the world want to stop this war, to end this genocide. At the same time, they're willing, obviously, to release the captives, provided that they have an exchange of prisoners. Now, 4 of the 5 conditions that the resistance has set previously in all the different negotiations are being met in this particular Trump deal, Trump plan. The only problem here is the withdrawal. And unless the Trump administration, the American delegation, presses the Israelis to withdraw to the positions that they agreed on in previous negotiations, it's going to be very difficult for this to fulfill. The Nakba is when 80% of the Palestinians in 1948 in the areas that were occupied by the Zionist state were displaced. And 77 years later, we're still in a situation where the majority between the river and the sea today are Palestinians. They have no rights, no civil or political rights, but the majority are Palestinians. The Palestinians are insisting that they will not leave their lands. Those who have been displaced outside also dream of that day, the day of return. Now we have 5th and 6th generations of Palestinians who are determined to go back to Palestine. This resilience, this determination, this will of the Palestinians is what's going to prevail at the end, despite the genocide, despite the war of extermination, despite the ethnic cleansing, the invaders. What we have today is an exhibit that shows the origins of this Nakba of 1948, as well as this unfolding Nakba that the Palestinians are facing in Gaza. But inshallah, they will also prevail. Thank you very much for being here.
Talk about Palestine being a symbol of international struggle, the same way Vietnam was in the 1960s and 70s, when everybody was identifying with that struggle against international imperialism. And I think Palestine could play that role eventually, and then you can link with the different struggles. I mentioned also the Black Lives Matter movement in America. I mean, it's not just a struggle against external enemies or external threats, but also within the societies themselves. You could see that in the United States, I predict within the next 2 decades, it's going to be huge turmoil inside as polarization becomes part and parcel of American society. And I think in that struggle, you could see also Palestine being a symbol. We already see the kufiyya being used by many people around the world. That tells you, it's a symbol. And I think that's what we need to do.
We need to confront Zionism everywhere in the world. You can't be on the sidelines if you wanted to end this particular injustice. And now Palestine, by the way, you could look, this is even beyond just Palestine. Palestine is the only issue in the world today that is capable of mobilizing in every capital of the world. Just tell me one issue that can get you all these demonstrations around the world, every corner of the world. I don't think you can find any. Which means Palestine today could also galvanize against all the injustices in the world, not just those who are carried out in Palestine, but beyond. because you could find that all these people who are ganging up on the Palestinians, who are supporting the Zionist structures, who are supporting the Zionist regime, are all the same people who perpetrate injustice everywhere in the world.
Oke, alhamdulillah ini udah cukup ramai ya. Kita sambil menunggu Prof Sami siap. Di sini aku mau ngajak ngobrol dikit nih sama teman-teman. Gimana kabarnya hari ini? Ini baru jam berapa ya? Ini kayaknya baru jam 9 ya, tapi kayak udah jam 9 malam ya. Energinya udah habis. Coba sekali lagi deh. Kita hari ini mau belajar loh dari seorang guru yang jauh-jauh datang dari Istanbul. Masa kita semangatnya cuma 5% sih? Aku ulang lagi ya. Gimana kabarnya hari ini? Alhamdulillah, luar biasa. Oke, tepuk tangan dong buat semuanya. Oke, gitu ya. Kalau mau bela Palestina, kita harus terus semangat. Kita harus punya energi yang melimpah ruah. Kenapa? Karena perjuangan mereka nggak pernah berhenti, teman-teman. Maka kita di sini yang sekarang bisa duduk dengan nyaman, bisa menikmati air conditioner, ya kalau di luar kan panas ya. Kita bisa duduk dengan nyaman, belajar. Kita harus memberikan effort yang jauh lebih. Karena kalau teman-teman dengar kabar terbaru sekarang, ada yang tahu kabar saudara kita di Gaza saat ini seperti apa? Ada yang mau menceritakan mungkin? Yang sekarang sedang sangat-sangat ini ya, struggle dengan musim dingin dan juga musim hujan. Ada yang sudah lihat videonya? Mungkin ada yang mau menyampaikan? Satu orang? Atau dari tim Smart deh? Boleh mungkin diputarkan nggak Kang Nendi videonya supaya teman-teman yang belum lihat kita bisa sama-sama kenal dulu apa sih yang mau kita pelajarin hari ini dan siapa saudara yang akan kita bela hari ini. Ada nggak video terbaru dari Instagram Smart aja? Kata Ibu mau dulu aja, tapi yang satu kata Ibu akhirnya. Oh, iya dulu. Ini bukan langsung sekarang. Jadi kalau putar dulu nggak? Putar dulu aja deh biar orang. Oke, jadi yang belum tahu bagaimana kondisi di Gaza saat ini, karena sudah mulai memasuki musim dingin, selain suhu yang sangat menurun drastis ya, di sana juga curah hujannya semakin tinggi. Tenda-tenda, karena kan mayoritas warga Gaza semua sekarang mengungsi ya di tenda. Semua food aid, supply bahan makanan ataupun barang-barang yang di tenda semuanya itu hanyut. Bahkan ada yang menggotong-gotong karung tepung yang itu sudah basah. Nah ini mungkin bisa lihat bahkan air-air masuk ke dalam rumah sakit ya. Jadi saat ini mereka dalam kondisi yang membutuhkan doa dan bantuan. Kita sudah hadir hari ini, mungkin kita langsung buka saja agenda pada hari ini. Oke. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain amma ba'du. Alhamdulillah, mari kita awali agenda kita pada hari ini dengan memanjatkan puji dan syukur kita kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala yang alhamdulillah atas nikmatnya kita masih diberikan kesempatan untuk hadir pada seminar hari ini. Kemudian salawat serta salam senantiasa tercurah limpahkan ke Nabi kita, Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, juga kepada keluarganya, sahabat-sahabatnya, tabi'in-tabi'at, dan kita semua selaku umatnya hingga akhir zaman. Kepada yang terhormat, Rektor dan jajaran Universitas Pajajaran, Direktur Kemahasiswaan Universitas Pajajaran, Pembina KMMK Universitas Pajajaran, Profesor Sami Al-Arian, Direktur Center for Islamic and Global Affairs, Bapak Harvin Naqsyabandi, SSI, Direktur Smart 1 Tujuan, Dr. Maimun Herawati, dan seluruh hadirin. Perkenalkan, saya Azka yang akan menjadi MC pada agenda puncak Al-Aqsa Awareness Week, Global Insight Forum, Youth Media, and the Global Struggle for Justice. Blessings and praise be to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Azka, and I will be your master of ceremony for the main agenda of Al-Aqsa Awareness Week, Global Insight Forum, Youth, Media, and the Global Struggle for Justice. Sebelum memulai agenda kita pada hari ini, mari kita dengarkan tilawah Quran yang akan dibawakan oleh Muhammad Hilmi Arkan. To begin our event with blessings, let us listen to the recitation of the Holy Quran presented by Muhammad Hilmi Arkan. Kepada Kang Hilmi, waktu dan tempat dipersilakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير وآتينا موسى الكتاب وجعلناه هدى لبني إسرائيل ألا تتخذوا من دوني وكيلا ذرية من حملنا مع نوح إنه كان عبدا شكورا وقضينا إلى بني إسرائيل في الكتاب لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين ولتعلن علوا كبيرا فإذا جاء وعد أولاهما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس شديد فجاسوا خلال الديار وكان وعدا مفعولا ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا إن أحسنتم أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن أسأتم فلها فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وجوهكم وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا صدق الله العظيم. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada Kang Hilmi yang telah membacakan tilawah Al-Quran. Semoga dengan dibacakannya Al-Quran menghadirkan keberkahan pada agenda kita pada hari ini. Memasuki agenda berikutnya, yaitu menyanyikan lagu Indonesia Raya. We will now proceed to the next agenda, the singing of Indonesian National Anthem, Indonesia Raya. Sebelum melanjutkan kepada agenda berikutnya, diberitahukan kepada seluruh peserta untuk mengisi kursi yang paling depan. Dan dimohon untuk kakak panitia bantu diarahkan pesertanya untuk berpindah dan mengisi bangku yang lebih depan terlebih dahulu. Selanjutnya, mari kita dengarkan sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh koordinator jaringan dari Baik Berisik, Teh Sarah Motiva. Next, we'll hear the welcoming remarks delivered by the networking coordinator of Baik Berisik. Kepada Teh Sarah Motiva, waktu dan tempat dipersilahkan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirrabbilalamin. Alhamdulillahilladzi allafa baina qulubina fa asbahna bi ni'matihi ikhwana. Assalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'du. Alhamdulillah, segala puji bagi Allah yang terus-menerus memberikan kita kenikmatan ya teman-teman semua, nikmat iman, Islam, ihsan, bahkan nikmat kesempatan yang alhamdulillah dia Allah izinkan untuk bertemu di hari yang berbahagia, hari yang hari ini kita memperingati apa teman-teman, ada yang tahu? Hari solidaritas untuk rakyat Palestina, alhamdulillah. Salam salam semoga tercurahkan kepada Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Semoga tercurah pula kepada keluarganya, kepada sahabatnya dan kelas laku umatnya yang hari ini kita diberikan amanah yang luar biasa gitu ya. Kalau misalkan kita sering menyebutkan kita memperpanjang risalah Rasulullah gitu, bentuknya apa sih sebenarnya yang nyata gitu ya. Nah hari ini yang jadi amanah buat kita untuk memperpanjang risalah Rasulullah adalah salah satunya menjaga tanah suci kita, ya, Baitul Maqdis gitu, yang menjadi parameter keimanan kita hari ini. Yang tadi dibacakan surat Al-Isra oleh Hilmi, ya, membuka acara ini, semoga menjadi reminder buat kita semua, gitu ya, untuk selalu memperpanjang nafas kita gitu untuk Palestina, karena hari ini yang jadi PR tuh bukan lagi memulai, ya, untuk bergerak untuk Palestina, tetapi konsistensi, gitu. Welcome Prof. Sami, dan alhamdulillah teman-teman semua, hari ini kita ada di hari solidaritas untuk Palestina, ya. Kita buktikan solidaritas kita kepada rakyat Palestina, dan hari ini juga bertepatan di hari yang sama saudara kita di Italia, di Irlandia gitu ya, sedang melakukan global strike juga di pelabuhan yang Genoa ya, pelabuhan Genoa yang mereka mematikan kehidupan gitu ya, untuk sebagai bentuk solidaritas saudara kita di Palestina. Dan selamat datang juga teman-teman semua, semoga hari ini bisa mengambil banyak hikmah pelajaran untuk konsisten gitu ya. Dan terima kasih kepada teman-teman dari Smart, dari Baik Berisik yang telah membuat agenda. Ini ada rangkaian agenda ya, udah 1 pekan Al-Aqsa Awareness Week gitu ya. Semoga dan KMMK ya, dari teman-teman Unpad, terima kasih banyak juga atas kolaborasi yang luar biasa. Kurangnya mohon maaf. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih kepada Teh Sarah Motiva yang telah memberikan sambutannya. Sebelum kita memasuki sesi utama, izinkan saya memperkenalkan moderator yang akan memandu diskusi kita hari ini, yaitu Dr. Maimun Herawati. Beliau adalah dosen dan direktur dari Smart Satu Tujuan. Before we begin the main session, allow me to introduce our moderator for today. Dr. Maimun Herawati will be guiding our discussion. She is a lecturer in journalism at the Faculty of Communication Universitas Pajajaran and also the director of Smart Satu Tujuan. Kepada Ibu Dr. Maimun Herawati, waktu dan tempat dipersilahkan. To Dr. Maimun, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Basically, this is out of the blue because I'm not preparing myself to be the moderator, but then I'm sorry, Prof. Before we begin inviting our Prof to the front, I would like to introduce him. Pakai bahasa Indonesia aja ya. Ya, bahasa Indonesia saja karena Bu Imun bicara dengan adik-adik ya. Jadi Profesor Sami adalah pendiri dari CIGA, Center for Islam and Global Affairs di IZU, Istanbul, Zain Sabahattin University di Turki. Beliau profesor di bidang luar biasa, beliau berasal dari Palestina, profesor beliau dari bidang sains, tapi kemudian isu-isu geopolitik itu sangat beliau kuasai. Oke, jadi kita akan bisa banyak belajar dari beliau. Satu yang perlu dicatat adalah beliau satu dari 3 Muslim Amerika yang masuk dalam ensiklopedia Muslim Amerika. Satu dari 3. Beliau sangat memahami masalah gerakan Zionis, makanya kita ingin nanti belajar dari beliau, termasuk juga media. Anak beliau, walaupun ini sebenarnya bukan perkenalan tentang beliau ya, anak beliau Mbak Laila Al-Arian itu jurnalis tangguh yang berkali-kali memenangkan International Award untuk karya-karya beliau. Jadi kita bisa banyak belajar dari keluarga Profesor Sami ya. Please Prof.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. It really gives me a great pleasure to be with you this morning. I want to thank the organizers and Professor Hirawati for their efforts of bringing all of you together. We come together at a time that is perilous, very difficult, not only for Palestinians, but also for the whole Muslim Ummah. But nations and our Ummah become stronger at times of challenges. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends us events and times so that we can learn from them and become stronger to face the challenges. The past 2 years have been very difficult for many people to see. We saw in Gaza the launching of a genocide. Palestinians are not the only people who had to face such horrible, horrendous war of extermination. Many people also had to face. What's unique about it is that people were witnessing it live, 24/7, day in and day out, for over 2 years. Even when people talk about other incidents, they will talk about them in the past. Maybe somebody heard about them, somebody witnessed it, but to be live streamed was a unique experience. So the whole world had to watch it, had to witness it, and to the horrendous situation, we see that the world was paralyzed, could not do anything about it, which also another lesson to be learned. What I would like to do today is to walk you through some of the important lessons that we need to learn and answer some of the questions that many people may have when it comes to what is happening and what has happened in Gaza. The Palestinian situation is not something that happened on October 7th. Palestine has been occupied since 1948. And people have to understand at least some of that history. The people of Gaza, when they broke their chains on October 7th, 2023, it came after a series of events. Most of the people who live in Gaza today are descendants of refugees.
Yes.
Gaza in 1948, the population was approximately 150,000. But over a course of year and a half between 1948 and 49, it grew by 300,000. In other words, at the time of the Nakba, after the Nakba, Gaza tripled its population, where 2/3 were descendants of refugees. These descendants of refugees have stayed in Gaza generation after generation. Now we are in the 5th and 6th generations of refugees. They were promised the right of return. That right never came, was never in any way, shape, or form, despite numerous UN resolutions, was achieved or fulfilled for the people of Palestine. Gaza has paid tremendous price for the crime of expelling Palestinians from Palestine because of a racist, supremacist, settler colonial movement called Zionism. We have to understand the nature and essence of the Palestinian situation, of the Palestinian cause. Palestinians lived on this land for millenniums. Over time, they changed what they believe, systems of belief, and until the majority accepted Islam. But there was sizable Christian community as well as Jews in Palestine. They're not many. At the turn of the 20th century, when the Zionist movement started late 19th century and wanted to spread itself in the 20th century, approximately over 85% were Muslim, about 10-15% Christian, and about 2-3% Jews.
Can I stop? Jadi ngerti nggak? Mau diterjemahkan nggak? Dapat terjemahannya nggak di WhatsApp? Ada? Oke.
Are we following so
yes,
far?
They are following, alhamdulillah.
Okay, if not following, let me know. I'll slow down, we'll change. So, the Zionist movement came as a result of a Jewish presence in Europe that was persecuted, discriminated against by Europeans. That culminated, of course, in the Holocaust during World War II. But the Zionist movement started half a century before as a result of these policies that were in existence for centuries in Europe. And they decided that the only way to alleviate these discriminatory policies or the persecution of Jews is to establish their own homeland. But this was not a religious movement. It used religion so that it can reach its objective of bringing Jews to the one place. They didn't care where. I mean, they considered many places, but the overwhelming majority of them said that they will not go anywhere except to Palestine. So they selected Palestine. Without delving too much into history, the end result is that they knew that they could not depopulate, displace the Palestinians, exile the Palestinians without using violence and force, and also link themselves to a great power that can empower them to do that. They did that. They worked very hard to get the British to adopt this project, the Zionist project. And that happened, culminated in what is called the Balfour Declaration in 1917. And that year and subsequent years, Britain became the mandatory power. In other words, it was given Palestine to administer, and from there, they empowered Jewish immigration coming from all over the world, particularly from Eastern Europe, so that they can start this project called Israel. The Zionist movement empowered itself, brought in tens of thousands of Jews. By 1948, that number that existed before the British mandate, which was approximately 25,000, swelled into 650,000. About 1/3 of the population became Jewish, mostly through illegal immigration, facilitated by the British occupation of Palestine. They played a role, international powers, particularly the United States, in trying to establish a Jewish national homeland in which what is called the partition of Palestine. They gave the Jewish population of about 1/3, 55% of the most fertile land in Palestine. And of course, that is without consulting the Palestinians. You're giving somebody's land to the people who were illegally immigrating there and who were armed to the teeth so that they can get this land by violence, by force, by military actions. Now, a lot of people say, another myth, that this happened because Jews purchased land. But there are documents, unrefuted documents, that the amount of land Jews had on the eve of 1948 did not exceed 6.5%.
Yes, that's true.
And then not only they went after the 55%, they started the war in 48, 49. That number swelled to 78%. Part of the imperatives of the Zionist movement, of how they expand and settle, is that they go and occupy land, they settle it, colonize it, and then they move forward. They destroyed over 532 villages so that make sure that the Palestinians cannot come back. They expelled, on the 78% they occupied, about 80% of the Palestinians, almost 800,000 from that area. And of course, as I said, 300,000 went to Gaza, the rest to the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, other places. Now, when you look at what happened on October 7th, you will find that these descendants of refugees who have been waiting to go back to their villages and towns and cities, they have been denied that right. But also, if you look at the place where they hit on October 7th, military bases, what they call settlements and other places, in this Gaza periphery, Gaza periphery.
Yes.
That part, in 1949, after the establishment of the state, there was an armistice, the ceasefire lines, that took place in January 1949. The area of Gaza was 565 kilometers square.
Yes.
Today it's 365.
Yes.
So what happened to these 200 kilometers
They
square?
took it.
At that time, the Palestinians had, I said, 565. There wasn't fences or walls or anything, so Palestinians who were displaced, they would go at night to their farms, to their houses, to their villages, and they will encounter Zionist forces. They will engage them, they will confront them, they might even injure them, kill them. And it was at the time administered under Egypt, so the Israelis would go and retaliate against the Egyptian army. So the Egyptian officer who was in charge of Gaza, his name was Mahmoud Riyad, had an agreement with the Israeli officer, commanding officer on the other side, that they will create a buffer zone of 200 kilometers square. It's almost a square area. so that Palestinians would not cross it, so that they stop going there and the Israelis stop retaliating against the Egyptians. This is the area where most of the settlements, military bases were there that the Palestinians did. In other words, this area was actually in Palestinian and Arab hands after the establishment of the state. What did Israel do? They just went there and took it, and they added it to what they had.
Just like the yellow lines now.
Yes, exactly. So you could see that. Now, let's go back a few years before October 7th. In 2006, they had an elections, the first and only elections across the Palestinian territories. The Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas, won that election. And since then, Israel, but it's also assisted by not only neighboring countries such as Egypt, but other countries around the world, to have a siege on Gaza, a complete crippling siege on Gaza. What does that mean? It means that nothing goes in or out from Gaza, land, air, or sea, except if the Israelis say so. They even would use something called mowing the lawn, meaning that every time the grass is up, they try to mow it. And by that, they meant they want to go and have few wars in between the siege, killing Palestinians and trying to work on it so that the Palestinians will never be able to do anything of significance to Gaza. They had one 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, and then in between we had the Great March of Return, then you had 2021, 2022, and 2023. Now, when Sinwar came, the person who is being accused as being the mastermind behind October 7th, he came to power as the head of Hamas in Gaza in 2017. And he was intent on lifting the siege over Gaza. So he asked the Palestinian Authority, this is the authority that was established after the Oslo process started in 1993 as a project for a two-state solution. In other words, that the Palestinians would give recognition on 78% of Palestine as an Israeli state in exchange for the Israelis affording the Palestinians a state on 22% of the land. Of course, the Israelis never had that intention. They never thought of giving the Palestinians any state. They said that plainly. They reaped the benefit of having a Palestinian recognition, at least the official representative of the Palestinians, and they started expanding their presence in those territories that they were supposed to give to the Palestinians as a Palestinian state, particularly in the West Bank. Yes. So the number of settlers went from 120,000 in 1993, today about 800,000. So obviously if someone does that, they have no intention whatsoever of having a Palestinian state. Nevertheless, Sinwar told Abbas, the head of the PA, come and take over Gaza, administer Gaza under one condition, lift the siege. But the Israelis have no intention of lifting the siege. The Americans are assisting them. They have no intention of pressuring the Israelis to lift the siege. The international community did not have the will or the capability to compel the Israelis to lift the siege. So the siege stayed. Now, when people hear the word siege, they may not understand what it really means. It means that every item that goes in has to be approved by the Israelis. So even chocolate for children, they would not allow, because they would say that this could be used, I don't know under what interpretation that would be accepted, as dual usage. They tried everything, and even they were boasting that they're measuring the calories of Gaza people.
Yes, I think I have to explain this in detail to them in Indonesia, Prof. Jadi bahkan termasuk dengan menghitung jumlah kalori yang dibutuhkan oleh seluruh orang Gaza, dan kemudian mereka tentukan hanya sekian truk yang bisa masuk. Itu pada saat genosida. Nah, lalu ketika katanya which is they fire, yang katanya gencatan senjata tapi tidak ya. Bahkan mereka tidak mengizinkan masuknya makanan yang protein tinggi, yang bergizi tinggi, yang untuk membantu supaya badan-badan saudara kita di Gaza yang sudah hancur karena famine ya, karena kelaparan akut, itu nggak boleh masuk. Tapi yang diizinkan masuk itu yang makanan yang tinggi gula, yang tinggi lemak, yang tidak akan banyak membantu perubahan dari yang famine akut menjadi lebih sehat tadi. Ini yang sedang terjadi. Jadi mohon maaf dijelaskan lebih detail, jadi biar bisa nyambung, karena kalau diterjemahkan pakai WhatsApp sepertinya tidak masuk yang background story-nya. Yes, Prof.
So the siege, as I said, they will count the number of calories and they will divide by half. So the Palestinians can barely live, but never enough. Most of the industries, most of the needs would not be available. Now people think, okay, so that's a worthy goal, try to lift the siege. They said Hamas is in charge of Gaza, so that's why we have the siege. So Sinwar will go to Abbas, say, come, take Gaza, but lift the siege. Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, would not be allowed, would be pressured by the Israelis and the Americans not to take over and leave the situation without any kind of relief. Sinwar goes to the Egyptians and said, if you negotiate, we can have a long-term truce, 10 years, 15 years, just get the siege lifted. Egyptians could not help or mediate that situation.
I think that's what we are trying to achieve right now as well, isn't it? Permanent ceasefire.
I will explain that. Yes. Yes. Then he went to the Israelis and gave that same thing. They said no.
No.
He tried peaceful protest, the Great March of Return.
No.
In 2018, 2019, they killed over 230 Palestinians. That didn't help. So when you look at why did March 7th happen, there are rational reasons. That's one reason, the siege on Gaza. That was going on now by that time in its 16th year. Complete isolation. Also, the Israeli government was elected in November 2022, and then took control in December. By January 2023, it was the most extreme right-wing government in the history of Israel. And one of those people who are in the government, Smotrich, who's also finance minister and in charge of the settlement policy, was telling people, now we have 800,000 people, we are going to complete 1 million and start on our next 1 million. And he said publicly, not only at the beginning of 2023, but subsequent to that, even in France, the Palestinians have 3 options. They have to adhere, submit, and say that this is a Jewish state, that they can never have any kind of political or civil rights as Palestinians in their own country. And if they do not submit to Jewish supremacy, then they can be compensated and leave. And if they refuse, the third option is death. Palestinians were not getting not the state, but their own country is disappearing, and their land and territories are disappearing before their own eyes. A third reason, not only the West Bank and Gaza, but Jerusalem. Another right extremist, Zionist, by the name of Ben Gvir, who was now in charge of the national police and Jerusalem, start talking about how they will build the third temple over the grounds of Al-Aqsa, the third holiest shrine for Muslims. They start encroaching, first every few months, then every month, then they want to do it every week, and they wanted to impose what they call the division in time and space, in which they said this is Jewish inside Al-Aqsa compound, that this is Jewish territory, and that they can have their own time and their own space so that they can build the third temple. So Jerusalem was also under threat, under jeopardy, in danger. That's why it's called Tufan al-Aqsa. The fourth reason, after Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem, is the situation with the prisoners. We had thousands upon thousands of Palestinian prisoners, more than 6,000, a third of them under what is called administrative detention. It means that you're not being charged with anything. You're simply being detained, arrested, put in the dungeon. It didn't matter that you're under 18, you're a child, or you're a woman, a mother, or even pregnant, or a person who's simply a student going about their business, because the whole reason for this is to terrorize the Palestinian population so that they can leave. So thousands. Now, when Ben-Gvir became part of the government, he was also a minister of national police, and he became in charge of the prison system, and he started taking privileges. These are privileges, they call them privileges, but they are rights, that the Palestinians have struggled for decades. The right to education, the right of visitation, the right of phone calls with your loved ones, the right to assemble together, to cook together, to pray together, the right to get degrees. All these things were taken by this person one by one, and he's threatening even to impose a death penalty and to give them enough food simply to survive. And he started administering this, and the life became unbearable for these people. And they were pressuring also the resistance movement in Gaza to do something about this. And all this happening, whether it is Jerusalem, West Bank, siege on Gaza, the prisoners, with barely anyone saying anything. Nobody's talking about this. Add to this that the world is going by. You have a world where Israel is becoming stronger militarily, and now they're trying to integrate it into the region. The US rules the world militarily. It shows its command through 8 different structures. In this region, in the Middle East and North Africa, but particularly between Egypt and Afghanistan, that military command is called CENTCOM, Central Command. About 20 countries. Israel was not part of this for many years. Israel was an associate member with NATO, which is the European Command. In 2020, they put Israel as part of the CENT Command, so it was integrated into the military structure and the military plans of this region. And the United States, starting in 2017, became in a fierce competition with China. For 25 years before that, it was basically the unipolar. No one was challenging US supremacy or US power. But as China rose and its economy became stronger, transferring and transforming into also a military power, the United States wanted to concentrate, to focus on the threat as they see it coming from China. But America also is very much in charge of this region, so it wanted to establish a policy of outsourcing the preservation and protection of US interests in the region to regional powers, and it chose Israel and Saudi Arabia to do that. But Saudi Arabia and Israel are not normalizing relations, so the concentration or the focus was on normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Saudi Arabia did not want to normalize alone. since there is no solution to the Palestinians, so it wanted to drag with it major Muslim countries, and it was working on Pakistan and Indonesia. So if you look at the fall of 2023, this is the strategic situation. No one cares about the Palestinians. The Palestinians under tremendous pressure from everywhere, settlement, aggressive settlement activity in the West Bank, trying to Judaize and build the third temple in Jerusalem, siege on Gaza, tremendous pressure on the prisoners, and the strategic situation is such a way that Israel is integrated into the region, and now you had someone like Netanyahu standing before the United Nations General Assembly 15 days before Tufan al-Aqsa, showing a map and drawing a line that started from India through the Indian Ocean, the Gulf of Oman, the Persian Gulf to the United Arab Emirates, from there through Saudi Arabia and Jordan to Haifa, and through the Mediterranean to Europe, calling it India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC. And he was boasting that this is going to show that Israel is the most important party member of this project, and Israel becoming a hegemon. In that map, he wrote Israel, there was nothing about Palestine. So the strategic situation also was very dim. No one talks about Palestine, no one talks about Palestinian self-determination, liberation, freedom, or anything. These are 5 rational reasons why Palestinians had to do something, because the world was bypassing them, don't care about them. Millions upon millions, not only inside Palestine, but outside Palestine, have been totally left behind. Now, Israel had options. What is called the two-state solution, which the Palestinians have accepted in terms of their official leadership because of the weakness of the situation. And they recognized Israel on 78% of Palestinian territories in 1993, hoping that they can recover 22%. And as I said, this process failed miserably. It was supposed to have ended in 1999, because it started officially in May 1994, and it had a 5-year span. Even in 2000, it failed miserably. We had the second intifada, and then there was no real negotiations, because Israelis had no intention to give the Palestinians anything. And Israel could have chosen 2 out of 3 things. They call themselves Jewish state, they call themselves democratic state. If they want to have Jewish and democratic, that means the majority of the people in that state would be Jewish. To do that, you give the Palestinians something, and that's the whole notion of a two-state solution. But actually, it turned out to be a two-state prison. One prison in the West Bank, and one prison in Gaza. Because they wanted to keep all 3. They wanted to be called Jewish. They want to be called democratic, but only for Jews. And they want to keep all the territory. That presented the problem. Because between the river and the sea, which is mandatory Palestine, the whole 27,000 square kilometer, there are more Palestinians today than there are Jews.
Yes.
About 7.3 million Palestinians and about 7.2 million Jews. So you can't call yourself a Jewish state. What you actually have is an apartheid state. You understand the notion of apartheid, which is a state based on 2 systems of laws. one system applied to some people, in this case, if you're a Jew, and another system to if you are a non-Jew, in this case, a Palestinian, where you have all the rights and the privileges as a Jew, and you have virtually no rights if you are a non-Jew. So in the West Bank, you will find these 800,000 settlers enjoying everything. They are armed to the teeth. Even when this right-wing government came to power at the end of 2022, they gave out over 150,000 of them weapons so that they can shoot Palestinians. They have roads that are for Jews only. They have wells and water they take from the Palestinians so that they can water the stolen land of the Palestinians, and so on and so forth. So this is apartheid, but it's a problem because the world over time will not accept apartheid. They have seen what they did in South Africa, so the Israelis knew that at one point they need to resolve this problem. So as the Palestinians broke their chains, it was a prison break on October 7th. It was not an attempt to liberate Palestine as much as to tell the world that Palestinians exist, that they need to do something, that we have prisoners who are suffering, that we have settlers who are roaming mad and terrorizing the Palestinians, that we have a siege over Gaza, do something about it. But the Israelis thought that this is a golden opportunity to resolve the problem of a Jewish minority in the land of Palestine, so they chose to apply a genocide. A genocide, they thought they can go after the Palestinians, destroy Gaza completely. Every hospital, every clinic, every school, university, bakery, public market, all the infrastructure, electricity, water salination plants, completely wiped out, destroyed. The intent was to make the Palestinians so desperate that they have no way to stay in Gaza. That will be complete destruction, going after not only the so-called militants, those who are fighting or members of resistance movements, but everyone. Tens of thousands of children, of women, of elderly people, of normal residents were targeted. We're talking at least over 250,000 between dead and injured, many maimed for life, over a 2-year period. That's what the Palestinians had to endure. This is a work and conduct not of a war. This was not a war. This was a genocide, an attempt at displacing the Palestinians so that they can, first of all, forget about resistance. They're trying to restore back this notion of deterrence that they lost on October 7th. Because October 7th, from a military standpoint, was a very successful, brilliant attempt at poking the eyes of the occupation. Israelis had in that periphery, Gaza periphery, all these military bases, their intelligence station that is monitoring the Palestinians, that is torturing the Palestinians, that is occupying and making all these decisions at making the Palestinian life unlivable. All of them were targeted very successfully. And the Israelis wanted to restore this notion that they have deterrence, that no one can actually attack them. And that's why they embarked not on a war, but on a genocide. But not just a genocide. Just imagine you have these Palestinians who've lost everything. All their education system, all their civil society, healthcare system, anything of meaningful, anything of meaning including homes, residences, just farms. All of them were lost. And on top of that, they had a starvation policy, a famine policy, because they controlled all the crossings. So the Palestinians did not have enough actually to survive, even though they lost their homes. They are living virtually in the streets. They don't have any kind of medical supplies. So if someone has to be operated on, they operate on them without anesthesia. Just imagine that you have to see your own child or wife or husband or father or mother being operated on without having any kind of anesthesia, because they have to amputate a limb. But not only that, also they don't have access to medicine. So if someone has long-term disease, they have no way of treating it. All these are the actions not of normal states, because all these things are war crimes. These are the actions of Nazi-type military. Every single crime imaginable was actually perpetrated in Gaza. Genocide, war crimes, trying to attack every civilian structure, such as hospitals, which is a war crime, universities, war crime, schools, war crime, residences, war crime, children, war crime, markets, bakeries, all these are war crimes. Add to this even how they treated their prisoners, denied food, tortured, killed on the spot in many instances, raped. All these are documented situations. And they didn't stop here. They also were doing it in the West Bank, particularly with the settler violence taking place almost daily, because the attempt was to displace the Palestinians. Now, the Oslo thing said that within the West Bank there would be 3 zones, A, B, and C. The A is where most Palestinians live, about 85% on 18% of the West Bank. And Zone B is about 22% of the land, which makes both of them 40%. And that's about another 10% of the population in the surrounding villages. Now, in Zone A, Palestinians will have, the Palestinian Authority will have the administrative and security power. In Zone B, they will have administrative, but security will be for the Israeli army. And Zone C, that's where they're trying to terrorize the Palestinians and displace them so they can take over. Now, the West Bank is about 18% of Palestine, while Gaza is about 3%. So both of them will make about 21, 22%. And that's the whole idea, is that they will not make it viable for Palestinians to have a state. So this notion that there is some sort of a two-state solution is a mirage, is an illusion. This is something they try to tell the rest of the world, particularly in Muslim countries. So many Muslim countries, they don't want to do the right thing about Palestine. So they use this thing that there is somehow a two-state solution as a word to lull us, to deceive us, to make us think there is something coming. But everybody knows better, including the Americans.
Can I explain this in Indonesia? Jadi Muslim di dunia itu seperti ditenangkan dengan konsep dua negara. Jadi kayak tenang, ada cita-cita yang bisa diraih. Insya Allah nanti ada negara Palestina. Padahal realitanya tepi barat itu hanya 12% dari keseluruhan tanah Palestina, dan Gaza hanya 3% dari keseluruhan tanah Palestina. Itu pun diteror dan blokade seperti halnya Gaza. Jadi ilusi solusi dua negara yang kemudian banyak dimanfaatkan oleh diplomasi termasuk kita ya di Indonesia, sebenarnya itu tidak bisa dijalankan gitu, karena sejatinya saat ini sudah dikuasai keseluruhannya oleh Israel. Mau gimana meletakkan solusi dua negara ini, dan sisanya cuma tinggal 15%, dan itu pun juga totally benar-benar secara total dikuasai oleh Israel. Makanya kemudian solusi dua negara dia ilusi begitu yang nggak mungkin bisa dicapai. Maybe we can discuss about the one state solution, maybe, ya, Prof.
I will discuss all actually. Yes. So this notion that there is a viable path towards a two-state solution was even acknowledged by the Americans themselves in the waning days of the Obama administration in December 2016. After the elections, even the Secretary of State, John Kerry, gave a speech, which was his last speech as Secretary of State in December 2016, in which he said there is no two-state solution. And the reason for that is because Israel killed a two-state solution. A two-state solution meant that there will be a state in the 1967 territories that Israel occupied in June 67, and that there will be some sort of a connection between Gaza and the West Bank. But Israel made sure that they have settled these areas, that they have built large blocks of settlements that will make it virtually impossible for a two-state solution. Now, we're being told by Muslim countries that there is a two-state solution, so why are we're working on it. But as I said, it's a lie. Don't believe it. It's an attempt to give Israel the time it needs to establish its Greater Israel project. And because Muslim and Arab and other states around the world who are trying to vouch or do something about this, they are unwilling to put what it takes to compel Israel for a two-state solution. In fact, the latest effort by Trump to involve himself was an attempt to stop this attempt. 2 days, a week, few days before Trump announced his plan on September 23rd, Saudi Arabia and France came with this notion that there is a world effort to push for a two-state solution. 80%, over 80% of the world countries of the UN members actually recognize the Palestinian state. But Trump came and changed the whole conversation. He does not, his plan, there is nothing about Palestinian state, there is nothing about any of that. It's trying to achieve by political means what Israel could not achieve through military means, through 2 years of a genocide. Yes. It not only wanted to push the Palestinians, displace the Palestinians, mass expel the Palestinians from Gaza. It also wanted the resistance to raise the white flag, to surrender, which it was not able to do.
Can I extend to them? Iya, jadi resolusi 2803 yang terakhir sebenarnya adalah menggunakan cara politik untuk mendapatkan hasil yang tidak bisa mereka dapatkan melalui gerakan militer, yaitu menaklukkan Gaza, lalu kemudian memaksa pejuang untuk menyerah. Maka kemudian mereka menggunakan jalan politik dengan resolusi Dewan Keamanan 2803 November kemarin, yang salah satu isinya adalah melucuti senjata pejuang karena mereka gagal melakukannya melalui gerakan militer. Nah, ini Trump yang jadi nggak benar kalau disebut ini adalah tindakan kebaikan begitu ya, karena sesungguhnya sama aja, cuman beda. Yes, bro.
So, when you look at objectively what Trump plan is trying to do, is trying to salvage the situation, because if we stop for a moment and see what has changed in 2 years, Israel's image as this state that is the most powerful in the region, that is capable of doing what it wants, was shattered. And because this image and reputation were shattered, they're trying to impose and restore this image of deterrence. But they could not do it except, in their view, a genocide where they can terrorize not only the Palestinians, but also the whole region, indeed the whole world, by acting like a madman who's willing to use whatever means at their disposal to destroy their enemies, regardless whether these policies, this conduct, this behavior is going against international law, against international conventions, against international humanitarian law, against every aspect of what a war is, because they have committed all these war crimes. Add to that for the first time, the ICJ, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, is looking into this, and they warned that these are, on prima facie situation, a genocide. And they warned Israel that they should not embark on this until Israel totally ignored them. So soon, I believe the International Court of Justice would say that this is a genocide. But the scholars of genocide have already termed it a genocide. Every human rights organization called it a genocide. And people have seen. If you go into what a genocide is, you will find it. Recently, the Gaza Tribunal held many sessions listening to witnesses and experts, and it rendered its decision that this was a genocide. But also, if you look at the other aspects of this war of extermination that Israel has embarked on, and how it lost strategically. Even the media, which has basically given a shield for Israel for decades. And I believe that many of you, at least with students of Professor Rawati, knows about media, that we could see a change, at least not only, maybe not much with legacy media, but media around the world, particularly with social media. That now people are not getting their facts simply from filtered media, but now they can see what's going on, which has made tremendous shift in public opinion around the world. It's a huge strategic loss. Even the head of the Israeli government, Netanyahu, acknowledged that they have a problem. He called it the TikTok problem. So what do? They go and buy it because they can't change the facts. So,
5 minutes.
left?
5 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right, so I need to wrap up. So I could have gone on and explained many of the strategic losses that they had. But if you look at the political solution, I thought I had more time, so I was taking my time actually. But the one-state solution means one man, one vote. No Zionist party would accept it because it means the end of Zionism.
Yes.
Apartheid is unacceptable. Genocide, obviously, is failing and unacceptable. They tried it. Had they been successful, if they were successful to mass expel the Palestinians, they would have also tried it in the West Bank and deal with this Palestinian demographic problem, but that failed. The world now has to look at this in a situation that would be really looking at the root of the problem in a very fundamental way. We are dealing with a Zionist movement, and Zionism very simply is a settler, colonial, racist, supremacist, expansionist, exclusivist, violent movement that is trying to uproot the indigenous people of the land and replace them with Jews around the world. This is the essence of the Zionist movement. And you cannot negotiate with it. A Zionist movement that has this kind of system of beliefs cannot be negotiated with in the same way that you could not negotiate with an apartheid regime. So the only solution really is to dismantle the system, dismantle evil, racism, supremacism, colonialism. That's what we are facing. And a Zionist is any person who believes that these people who are not indigenous, these colonial settler people, because somehow they thought or they think that they had some connection to the land 3,000 years ago, that they have the inherent right to come expel the Palestinians and settle Jews in Palestine in a sovereign state. If you believe in that, you're a Zionist. You could be Jewish, you could be Christian, you could be Muslim, you could be Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, non-religious, it does not matter. So if you believe in a two-state solution, then you are 78% Zionist, I joke. Because that means that you believe that they are entitled to the 78%. That's, my family grew in Jaffa. Both my fathers and mother were born there. And they have every right, and their ancestors have every right. You can't just expel them and dispossess them and say, okay, these people who came from Poland and Ukraine and Moldova and Russia and America and England and France and Hungary and Poland and Yemen and Iraq and Morocco, somehow these people have the right to settle. And Argentina and Latin America and India and Africa have the right to settle, while my parents who were there for hundreds of years have no right. That is just unjust. And therefore, the only solution is to dismantle these Zionist settler colonial structures. How we do this is another conversation we can have. But this is what we have to do. So we cannot talk about two-state solution, all that. 57 countries came twice. 57 Muslim majority countries came twice. November 11th, 2023, 5 weeks after Tufan al-Aqsa, exactly a year later, November 11, 2024. They have over 5 million soldiers, over 20,000 tanks and missiles and airplanes and all kinds of weapons. They never considered that. Had they even considered and threatened, who knows what would have happened. And they could not stop the genocide. And they didn't even do the thing that they agreed on, which is to deliver aid to the Palestinians. That they even couldn't do, unless Netanyahu said so. So that begs the question is why? Why 57 countries, with all this tremendous amount of power and leverage, could not stop a genocide? These count for over 2 billion people around the world. This is only 7 million. Why we couldn't do it? One reason is because we're not independent. We're not sovereign. Because they control us. We're being controlled by the imperialist powers, by great powers. And until we become independent and sovereign, we will be in this state of weakness. Yeah. That means we, as majority Muslims in other places, we need to start making our countries sovereign and independent, demanding from our political leaders to do that. And they use different tactics. I don't have time to go over them, so how we are not independent, but that's what we need to do, because the ultimate goal is not only to save Palestine, it's to save the world. We should no longer, this is my last point, we should no longer look this as a Palestinian problem. It's an Israeli problem. Once we shift that understanding, that Israel is a threat to every country, every society in the world, it will not allow any country in the region to become powerful or independent or united or scientifically developed or economically prosperous because it thinks all these things are a threat to it. So it will make sure that it will undermine every country. It wants to break up Syria and Iraq and Iran and Libya and Sudan and every other country, because that's the only way it can become the hegemon. So it's a threat to every country. It's trying to also to break up Pakistan. And I would not be surprised that eventually, if any country, any society is trying to become powerful enough and it has enough significant number of people who want to support this cause, it will also try to break them up. That's why we saw these millions of people around the world. Palestine has become the country, the cause that can mobilize tens of millions of people. This is the struggle for the future and struggle for justice and genuine peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Beneran ngerti nih? Ada 57 negara mayoritas muslim, diwakili 2 miliar muslim, memiliki jutaan militer dengan ribuan tank dan pesawat, tapi gagal menghentikan genosida. Dan ini adalah kata Prof, karena 57 negara ini tidak independen, tidak berdaya. Dan mereka tidak berdaya itu satu sesi yang khusus lagi, jadi tidak dibahas sekarang. Jadi kayaknya nanti sesi siang. Jadi mereka berusaha untuk melemahkan 57 negara yang banyaknya mayoritasnya adalah muslim, karena mereka tidak ingin terancam dalam tanda kutip, karena mereka kolonialis kan. Sehingga kita harus mengubah cara berdiri kita, bukan melihat masalah Palestina, tapi yang menjadi masalah ada Israel. Karena mereka tidak saja kemudian melemahkan perjuangan menuju kemerdekaan Palestina, tapi juga menghancurkan Sudan, Irak, Iran, dan Lebanon dan sekitarnya. Dan Indonesia. Banjir yang terjadi sekarang adalah karena penggundulan hutan yang silakan cari siapa yang ada di belakangnya. Bukan Bapak Zulkifli Hasan ya. Karena perusahaannya yang harus kita lihat siapa yang melakukan itu semua. Ini kok jadi shifting ke Indonesia ya. Terima kasih, thank you very much Prof. Dan selanjutnya kita mengundang Kang Harvin, wartawan SCTV, yang akan berbicara banyak tentang bagaimana media dan Palestina tentunya. Karena Kang Harvin sudah, saya turun.
Tidak dong, harus ditemenin.
Baik. Silakan.
Oh iya, setelah kita diskusi.
Oke.
Silakan dipandu aja.
Baik nih Kang. Is it okay if we use bahasa, Prof? Yes. I will try to translate a little bit of it. Right. Kang, tadi kita sudah mendengar banyak dari Prof tentang bagaimana persoalan yang ada sekarang itu tuh sudah sedemikian parahnya ya, karena dengan resolusi yang ada itu tidak menghentikan genosida, bahkan sebaliknya begitu ya. Ada legalisasi secara politik untuk melakukan apa yang tidak bisa berhasil mereka lakukan dalam 2 tahun operasi militer. Nah, kaitannya dengan media di Indonesia, Kang, bagaimana Akang melihat pemberitaan tentang Palestina dan perjuangan merdekanya itu ditangkap oleh teman-teman, ditangkap oleh media di Indonesia dan diterjemahkan menjadi berita?
Oke, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ya, kalau menurut saya pribadi ya, sebagai jurnalis yang alhamdulillah sudah 3 kali mungkin mengawal misi kemanusiaan ke Gaza, Palestina usai serangan 7 Oktober ya. Jadi ini penggambaran saya pribadi sebagai jurnalis usai 7 Oktober, peristiwa 7 Oktober tuh saya berangkat di akhir 2023 Desember teh. Setelah itu berangkat lagi 2024 Setelah itu alhamdulillah kita bisa bersama ya Teh di Tunisia yang tergabung dalam gerakan misi kemanusiaan menembus blokade Gaza Global Sumut Flotilla. Dari pengalaman itu Teh, jadi kalau menurut saya pribadi sebagai jurnalis, memang kalau jurnalis atau media di Indonesia itu masih mengutip pemberitaan-pemberitaan media internasional, sehingga tentunya akan sangat minim fakta yang didapat karena kan mengutip media internasional. Sementara pengalaman saya pribadi terjun ketiga kali misi kemanusiaan dan meliput langsung, itu akan beda Teh. Jadi mendapatkan faktanya itu sangat lebih luas gitu. Itu terbukti dari liputan-liputan saya. Selain melakukan peliputan kemanusiaan dari masyarakat Indonesia untuk masyarakat Palestina di Gaza, saya juga beberapa kali menulis atau membuat liputan investigasi. Dan di situ terlihat ketika kita langsung terjun benar-benar ke lapangan gitu, melihat kondisi realitas fakta di lapangan terkait masyarakat Palestina, itu luar biasa. Itulah mengapa ada perbedaan itu Teh. Ketika kita hanya mengutip dari media-media asing ya, karena memang mungkin kan media Indonesia itu kan media-media nasional di Indonesia khususnya kan punya kontributor dari negara-negara, dari media-media luar gitu ya. Beda ketika kita nih media jurnalis dari media Indonesia, dari media nasional Indonesia gitu kan, terjun langsung ke lapangan, itu akan mendapatkan fakta yang cukup sangat berbeda jauh. Soal ini misalnya, bagaimana penderitaan masyarakat Palestina di perbatasan Rafah Mesir misalnya, atau bagaimana proses evakuasi, bagaimana proses mereka keluar, atau bagaimana sulitnya kan mengirimkan bantuan ke Gaza lewat Mesir atau lewat Yordania ke Gaza. Itu akan tampak perbedaannya ketika kita terjun langsung. Contoh ketika 2023 akhir, itu bagaimana kita menggambarkan langsung proses pengiriman bantuan kemanusiaan dari masyarakat Indonesia melalui jalur Mesir ke Gaza, Palestina. Kan kalau kita melihatnya pengiriman itu ya, terus tersalurkan. Tapi proses di lapangannya itu ketika reportase luar biasa. Bahkan satu kontainer bantuan itu bisa sampai ke Gaza itu lebih dari sebulan. Kalau tidak dikawal, kita tidak bisa memastikan apakah bantuan dari masyarakat Indonesia itu bisa sampai. Itu dari misi kemanusiaan bantuan. Dari kacamata fakta langsung di lapangan, melihat kengerian genosida misalnya. Kalau kita melihat mungkin di sosial media yang direportasekan oleh para pejuang jurnalis dari Palestina, itu sudah sedemikian parahnya gitu. Tapi ketika kita langsung melakukan peliputan, kita mendapatkan sisi lainnya. Cerita langsung, reportase langsung dari kita, seorang jurnalis Indonesia yang mewawancara langsung korban. Kebetulan saya waktu itu di Mesir itu berkeliling, karena ada beberapa rumah sakit di Kairo itu yang memang menerima bantuan atau menjadi tempat evakuasi masyarakat Palestina yang memang membutuhkan penanganan medis gitu kan. Bagaimana proses keluar dari Gaza ke Kairo, itu dia cerita bagaimana detik-detik hancurnya rumah sakit Indonesia kami dapatkan secara eksklusif.
Oke.
Gitu.
Ini berarti wartawan yang memang meliput langsung itu memiliki istilahnya fakta yang demikian kuat begitu ya, dan itu keluar menjadi pemberitaan. Kira-kira kenapa tidak semua media melakukannya, Kang?
Nah, lagi-lagi kan pilihan deh.
Oke.
Jadi di dalam sebenarnya jurnalis itu apakah boleh memihak? Tidak boleh. Setuju kan? Sepakat. Tapi kalau dalam prinsip saya, dan ada beberapa juga pandangan terkait pemahaman ini, jurnalis itu boleh memihak kepada fakta dan kebenaran. Untuk mendapatkan fakta dan kebenaran, bagaimana caranya? Kalau kita cuma mengutip berita-berita dari media luar, apakah itu puas gitu loh? Nah, makanya tadi tergantung dari motivasi jurnalisnya dan medianya. Kalau alhamdulillah, kalau kami di Liputan MCTV, seperti yang disampaikan oleh pimpinan redaksi kami komitmen. Kami komitmen akan selalu konsisten mengawal pemberitaan misi kemanusiaan dari teman-teman lembaga atau masyarakat Indonesia untuk masyarakat Gaza Palestina. Itu sudah kami buktikan dengan 3 kali kami ikut serta dalam misi kemanusiaan. Usai 7 Oktober di Desember, Maret 2024 bahkan saya pribadi alhamdulillah bisa masuk ke Al-Arian. Jadi untuk masuk ke Al-Arian itu luar biasa Ada 15 checkpoint kalau kita ingin masuk ke gerbang Rafah, dan itu tidak mudah. Ya, alhamdulillah saya bisa masuk ke Al-Arian melewati 9 checkpoint waktu itu dan bisa melihat langsung bagaimana kondisi real, antrian panjang proses pemberian bantuan ke Gaza, truk-truk yang mengantri. Dan ada satu fakta yang menarik yang membuat akhirnya alhamdulillah kami Liputan MCT bisa memberikan publikasi dokumentasi yang memang secara fakta punya nilai informasi yang tinggi. Ternyata ada satu gudang di Sinai Utara itu di Al-Arian, ya, titik sebelum menuju ke Rafah perbatasan. Di gudang itu tuh banyak sekali bantuan-bantuan kemanusiaan yang ditolak oleh Israel Zionis. Nah ini juga jarang diketahui jarang. Nah ini harus dipublikasikan kan. Nah alhamdulillah kami mempublikasikan itu. Ternyata banyak sekali kan, kalau kita mungkin niat-niat ya memberikan bantuan kepada masyarakat Palestina, ngirim bantuan apa-apa. Nah ternyata ada barang-barang tertentu ditolak. Nah itu mungkin akan menjadi evaluasi.
Barang apa aja?
Kebanyakan tuh alat elektronik.
Oh, oke.
Yang paling tidak bisa juga kayak besi, plastik, yang bisa mungkin. Ini analisa dari teman-teman dari Mesir ya. Kayak contoh misalnya buat
kruk.
Buat kaki itu patah. Nah itu juga itu tidak bisa masuk. Tongkat juga tidak bisa. Itu banyak sekali gitu. Nah ini kan jarang terpublish gitu kan. Terus ada juga banyak prosesnya yang sangat birokrasi. Mungkin kalau ada dari teman-teman di sini yang sudah melihat liputannya, bagaimana proses jalur itu. Jadi ketika dari misi kemanusiaan bantuan kemanusiaan dari Kairo itu nggak lantas langsung masuk ke Rafah Gaza. Itu ada upaya licik dari Zionis. Jadi setelah Al-Arian, bagaimana proses itu sangat ketat, dia akan bergerak harusnya kan langsung ke Rafah Gaza, tapi dibelokkan
Karim Salom
ke gerbang Nitzana, yang otoritasnya itu di mana yang Zionis, ya kan? Setelah itu bukan langsung dimasukkan ke Gaza, setelah itu dibalikan lagi ke Rafah, ke atas lagi, jaraknya itu sekitar Bogor Jakarta. Ya gimana truk-truk itu bisa masuk ke Gaza dengan cepat, dengan cara-cara licik yang dilakukan oleh Zionis seperti itu. Kami Liputan MCTV melakukan reportase itu dan menyampaikan ke publik. Nah, itu fakta yang kami dapatkan, sehingga narasi dan informasi angle-angle berita ketika jurnalis langsung liputan ke lapangan akan semakin banyak gitu. Dibanding mungkin kita kebanyakan ya mengutip media-media luar negeri ya, yang mungkin mohon maaf ya itu juga kan kadang-kadang kita butuh konfirmasi lagi kebenarannya kan. Tapi kalau misalnya kita langsung ke lapangan, insya Allah gitu loh, kalau jurnalisnya kita nih datang ke lapangan itu pastikan kalau bahasanya A1 fakta gitu. Tidak mungkin kita memberitakan berita hoax atau tidak benar. Jadi jurnalis memihak, menurut saya pribadi itu boleh. Memihak kepada kebenaran.
Baik.
Dan fakta.
Nah ini kan nih teman-teman di sini banyaknya para aktivis Palestina nih Kang, orang-orang yang ingin berjuang membantu Palestina, ya enggak? Coba angkat tangan yang mau bela Palestina. Semua mau bela Palestina. Tetapi dengan kondisi di mana wartawan hanya sedikit yang apakah karena masalah resources atau karena memang kesempatan hanya sedikit yang bisa ke Palestina. Ini teman-teman di sini nih, para pemuda yang keren-keren ini bisa membantu wartawan seperti Kang Harvin untuk membantu Palestina. Itu kok cara kerjanya gimana Kang untuk bisa saling bantu, jadi kayak kolaborasi namanya teman-teman. Jadi bagaimana supaya kerja ke Palestina ini bisa lebih terangkat dari pemuda yang ingin membela Palestina melalui Kang Harvin, wartawan yang pro Palestina.
Iya,
kira-kira gimana tuh Kang?
Yang pertama tentunya kita harus banyak ya menyuarakan pemberitaan terkait Palestina dengan cara kolaborasi. Mengadakan sebuah kegiatan diskusi terkait tadi misalnya yang dikatakan oleh Prof bahwa solusi dua negara. Apakah anak-anak muda sekarang melek terkait isu itu?
Melek.
Yang di sini insya Allah ya. Tapi apakah yang di luar sana melek? Kadang ada yang acuh. Taunya cuman soal Gaza diserang, pembunuhan di Gaza, it's okay. Tapi apa misalnya kerugian, dampak, keuntungan, kerugian terkait solusi dua negara? Apa bahayanya untuk Palestina terkait solusi dua negara? Itu kan juga jarang deh. Kami ini dari sisi jurnalis misalnya, kami juga sangat sedikit ya terkait kesempatan-kesempatan untuk melakukan sebuah peliputan atau ada diskusi yang masif misalnya terkait isu-isu ini gitu. Terkait misalnya aksi-aksi itu pasti dong kami selalu melakukan pemberitaan terkait aksi-aksi massa, kita melakukan unjuk rasa itu. Tapi untuk detail kegiatan-kegiatan terkait isu-isu yang saat ini memang harus terus dikawal, itu kan perlu ada penjagaan deh. Dari kita semua, nggak cuma dari jurnalis. Nah, kita perlu kolaborasi. Misalnya teman-teman membuat sebuah kegiatan yang masif tentunya mengawal bagaimana proses ini akankah berjalan baik ataukah berjalan buruk. Kita kan nggak tahu. Bahkan kemarin infonya juga kan sudah ada pengesahan dari Dewan Keamanan PBB terkait masalah pelucutan senjata. Itu kan juga apa nanti baik buruknya buat masyarakat Palestina gitu kan. Ini juga perlu kita kritisi. Nah, bikin pemberitaan yang semasif mungkin terkait isu ini. Jangan sampai di Google ya itu soal pemberitaan itu menurun terus gitu loh. Jadi jangan cuma mengharapkan media mainstream. Jari teman-teman juga perlu di media sosial untuk terus memberitakan. Kalau perlu kita kolaborasi misalnya, bikin sebuah gerakan, gitu kan. Dan tentunya kalau dari kaidah jurnalistik kan tetap harus berimbang ya teh, gitu kan. Itu juga bisa dilakukan. Nah kami Liputan MCTV misalnya, saat melakukan peliputan di Mesir misalnya, kami membongkar bagaimana banyaknya warga Palestina yang harus mengeluarkan ribuan dolar untuk bisa keluar dari Gaza ke Mesir.
5.000 sampai 10.000.
5.000 sampai 10.000. Saya pribadi itu keliling di Kairo. Saya keliling 2 hari mencari warga Palestina yang memang dipungliin lah tanda kutip. Gitu kan? Alhamdulillah dapat. Di situ kita bisa mendapatkan sebuah informasi ternyata ya eksklusif, wawancara eksklusif, pengakuan mereka harus keluar dari Gaza. Mereka keluar dari Gaza itu sebenarnya nggak mau, tapi karena untuk berobat karena kan di sana di Gaza itu kan sangat minim setelah serangan-serangan, fasilitas rumah sakit juga rusak gitu kan. Akhirnya mereka harus keluar, entah itu ke Yordania atau ke Mesir. Gitu kan. Nah, proses-proses itu kan membutuhkan uang ternyata. Ada pungli-pungli gitu kan. Nah, kami Liputan MCTV pada saat itu di Mesir melakukan reportase itu dan mendapatkan langsung. Tapi kan kami juga mengkonfirmasi tidak serta-merta kita ini memihak dalam tanda kutip misalnya hanya menyampaikan temuan dari warga Palestina saja. Namanya jurnalis kan harus berimbang. Gitu kan. Kita memihak kepada fakta, setuju, sepakat semua pastinya ya. Tapi dalam konteks jurnalistik tentunya kita harus berimbang. Makanya waktu itu ada juga kita statement yang kita dapatkan dari pemerintah Mesir karena diduga memang ada andil oknum pemerintahan Mesir yang
tapi memang, kabarnya oknum itu temannya Sisi.
Ya. Gitu kan. Jadi intinya kegiatan-kegiatan seperti itu yang harus kita tekankan ke depan sehingga campaign dan pemberitaan terkait Palestina akan terus ada. Jangan sampai, contoh saya tadi ngecek nih misalnya, saya cek di Google Kita cek di Google misalnya. Bener atau enggak ya?
Oh keren HP Samsung. Baru lihat soalnya. Apa cina Kang di Google?
Solusi dua negara Palestina misalnya.
Oh.
Ya tadi kan dibahas ini kan.
Two state solution.
Ya.
Nah. Kita klik.
Ini pemberitaan terakhir itu 22 September.
2022.
Kalau saya lihat.
Jadi udah mulai slow ya guys.
Di media mainstream ya. Ini kita berbicara media mainstream ya. Ada juga mungkin yang ya kurang lebih di 16 September lah. Otomatis kan sekarang udah November kan. Nah maksud saya hal kayak ini terus dikawal supaya kita bisa memberikan edukasi kepada tentunya kan kepada masyarakat Indonesia yang berjuang ya demi masyarakat Palestina juga harus diberikan informasi-informasi update terkait Palestina sehingga gerakan-gerakan ini akan terus membantu untuk masyarakat Palestina.
Saya rasa kita sepakat ya bahwasanya nanti apa yang ditampilkan oleh Kang Harvin di media beliau kita akan like and share ya nggak sih? Ya, salah satu cara untuk menaikkannya ya, insya Allah. Jadi Kang Harvin sudah punya reseller dari gerakan kepalestinaan yang di ruangan ini yang akan meluaskan jangkauan berita SCTV insya Allah.
Insya Allah, amin.
Insya Allah.
Dan satu lagi jangan pernah terfokus pada 1-2 influencer di Indonesia. Teman-teman di sini juga bisa jadi influencer.
Wah,
gitu loh.
Ada satu di sini yang saya tahu, Bu JJ. Teh JJ ini sudah influencer level ini juga berapa puluh ribu? 70.000.
Ya pokoknya intinya siapapun di sini bisa jadi influencer untuk membantu perjuangan dari masyarakat Palestina. Gitu. Jadi intinya yuk kita gerakan semakin masif pemberitaan apapun dan tentunya tidak menyebarkan berita hoax ya. Kita harus ada.
Jadi tidak ada ya TNI Libas 230 IDF. Bohong banget. Coba cek YouTube-nya, channelnya bro, itu fiksi. Ya, ada tuh yang ibu-ibu nanya ini benar apa enggak? Tentara TNI Libas 230 tentara IDF, ya Allah, tinggal dibuka kanalnya di situ udah bilang ini semua adalah fiksi.
Jadi mudah-mudahan lah kita bisa tergerak seperti tadi paparan dari Prof juga kan itu membantu kita untuk mengedukasi informasi terkini terkait perjuangan Palestina gitu kan. Nah kita sebagai jurnalis tentunya dan mungkin konten kreator ya siapapun itu saya rasa harus terus bergerak membuat konten-konten yang memang bisa membantu perjuangan warga Palestina.
Ya, jadi kalau tadi kita lihat menurut Akang ada penurunan yang sangat drastis isu masalah problem genosida yang terkait Palestina itu menurun sekali di media sosial dan di media mainstream. Nah, ini selain tadi kata Kang Harvin, mari kita kolaborasi bikin konten tentang Palestina sehingga naik lagi konten-kontennya. Ada lagi nggak Kang yang bisa kita kerjakan bareng-bareng kolaborasinya?
Ya intinya mungkin kita bisa juga melakukan pelatihan karena kita harus regenerasi juga.
Pelatihan ya.
Regenerasi untuk karena kan banyak sekali konten-konten kreator kita mungkin yang sudah senior gitu kan, yang sudah kita harus memunculkan konten-konten kreator atau jurnalis-jurnalis muda yang baru yang peduli terhadap perjuangan Palestina.
Oke, angkat tangan yang ingin menjadi next konten kreator the best Indonesia untuk Palestina. Nah, banyak nih Kang. Kita bisa
mudah-mudahan kita
berlatih bareng.
Dan saya yakin dengan kualitas jurnalis Indonesia saat ini yang dipunya oleh Indonesia akan bisa sharing juga terkait seperti apa membuat berita, seperti apa teknik reportase, seperti apa misalnya memberikan pemahaman terkait kode etik jurnalistik gitu kan. Saya yakin banyak yang bisa sharing dengan kita gitu dan membantu. Terlebih kita Indonesia gitu kan banyak sekali sudah banyak gitu jurnalis-jurnalis senior juga gitu kan. Dan kalau saya pribadi insya Allah saya siap bantu gitu kan.
Kita tunggu Kang Harvin di sesi berikutnya.
Berbagi sharing gitu kan bagaimana kita semua sepakat kita akan bantu perjuangan rakyat Palestina dari segi pemberitaan, konten kreator tentunya dari sudut pandang yang positif. Kita juga bukan memihak gimana-gimana, tapi kita ingin memihak kepada kebenaran karena fakta yang kita lihat sudah jelas. Teman-teman yang sudah syahid, teman-teman jurnalis di Palestina, saudara-saudara kita di Palestina yang sudah syahid juga membuktikan bahwa itu bukan visual atau gambar hoax, tapi itu fakta itu. Nah, kita di Indonesia harus terus meneruskan perjuangan kawan-kawan kita, saudara-saudara kita, jurnalis di Palestina yang sudah syahid.
Ya, Rob. I will explain this in summary, Prof. What we have been discussing just now is not all Indonesian media have the ability or maybe a will to send journalists to the ground. Although Indonesian journalists up till now cannot go inside Gaza, but then they are around Al-Arian, just like our brother here. And then the discussion is about how to do collaboration between young people and a journalist, and how we are able to, in a way, push more to, the narrative to win the narrative in media, inshallah. That's what we discussed just now. Okay then, are we going to open the question answer session? Ya Kang, ya kita buka sesi tanya jawab. Bertanyanya boleh pakai bahasa Arab. Oke, siapa dulu yang mau bertanya? Boleh bahasa Sunda, boleh bahasa Indonesia, boleh bahasa Inggris, boleh bahasa Arab, boleh. Jawa juga boleh. Silakan. Siapa dulu? Oke, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, banyak banget. Oke, 5 dulu ya. Yang tadi sudah saya hitung, boleh angkat lagi nggak 5 lagi? Tadi 5, oke. Masih di baris ini ya. Yang pertama 1, 2, bukan, yang di belakang Teteh dulu. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oke. I think we have to make it short question. Boleh pakai bahasa Sunda. Boleh ke Prof, boleh ke Kang Harvin.
Excuse me, for the professor, I want to ask a question on how. Excuse me, my name is Nabil, and here I want to ask a question on how crucial the media is in the contemporary world. As we know, it takes enormous time and effort for us to awaken or enlighten some people of the violence being done towards Palestinians, because Israel keeps regurgitating lies and propaganda through, what you have called, heavily filtered media. How can we, as individual students, to do at least the bare minimum, that is to tell people that not only is the Zionist colonization is a contemporaneous fact, that it is something that have been happening for so many years. I wonder that if merely by spreading awareness on this matter helps the Palestinian cause in any way, because as you might have known, some people are so apathetic that they see no benefit for themselves to know about this matter. I want to know what is the most effective way for us, the youth, to help the cause through media, to know that our minimal efforts may result in many benefits for the Palestinians, to know that we do not just speak, but that we may also be heard. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Rafi Islamadina, and before I'm asking my question, I would like to send my gratitude to our professor for all of your contribution toward Palestinian cause. So my question is quite short. Back then in October 7th, when the uprising happened in Gaza, there are many rumors that say that the West Bank will happen the same. The people of West Bank will also rise against Israeli oppression. And yet, until this day, we've seen that while there is some action, it's not like a full-scale uprising like that happened before, like in first and second Intifada. Could you explain the reason why the lack of reaction from the West Bank? Thank you.
Sure.
Wow.
Ini siapa lagi?
Ke teteh di 2 yang di belakang, belum nanti kemudian 1 ya teteh di belakang ya, sama 2 teteh nanti ya. Silakan teteh.
Oke, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke, siap. Mohon izin memperkenalkan diri, saya Fitria Pujawati dari SJP UIN Bandung. Mohon izin bertanya kepada Prof. Tadi sempat disampaikan bahwa 57 negara yang itu Muslim ya, tapi tidak berdaya di hadapan Israel. Nah, di sini saya beberapa kali membaca tentang organisasi Persatuan Muslim di Dunia, itu OKI atau Organization of Islamic Cooperation, itu menjadi salah satu organisasi kedua terbesar di dunia setelah PBB. Di sini saya ingin menanyakan, apakah mungkin organisasi ini bisa direvitalisasi menjadi organisasi yang powerful, menjadi organisasi yang menandingi PBB untuk menyelesaikan isu-isu umat muslim di dunia, bukan hanya di Palestina. Kan banyak ya, di Sudan, di Uighur, kemudian di Rohingya dan lain sebagainya. Sepertinya kita tidak bisa terlalu berharap pada PBB dengan menimbang bagaimana PBB itu ada Dewan Keamanan dan 5 negara di Dewan Keamanan itu memiliki kepentingannya masing-masing yang jika diteliti itu tidak terlalu memihak pada umat muslim. Nah, apakah bisa OKI ini menandingi kekuatannya PBB? Jika iya, bagaimana langkah strategi untuk menuju ke sana? Jika tidak, apakah memang persoalan umat muslim ini tidak bisa selesai di meja negosiasi, harus mengangkat senjata? Oke, seperti itu.
The translation is, tepuk tangan dulu untuk
Fitria Pujawati.
Fitria asking you the question regarding the 57 Muslim countries, and then we also have OIC, Organization for Islamic Countries, and then her question is it possible to empower the OIC to substitute the United Nations function to solve the Muslim world problem? If it is possible, how to do that? If it is not possible, how to solve our ummah problem, global problem? That's the question. I will ask 2 more questions.
I need to write because I don't know if I would remember all these questions.
Fania will remind you the question. Okay, takut lupa. Is it okay? Yang 2 lagi kalau gitu nanti aja ya. Okay. Yes, bro.
Let me start with the second question first about the West Bank. In 2021, when there was an attempt to take over Al-Aqsa, we saw that the West Bank has risen. And since then, the Israelis have made sure that there would be things in place, that this will not be repeated. The same thing with the 1948 areas. They use many tactics. First of all, the Palestinian Authority has a security coordination program with the Israelis. As I said earlier, over 80% of the Palestinians in the West Bank live on these areas, 22%, which is the major cities. So the Palestinians, majority of them are confined in these areas, and they are being policed and controlled by these Palestinian forces to make sure that the Palestinians cannot go outside the designated 9 cities that they live in, so that they will not cause trouble for the Israelis. On top of that, the Israelis have been extremely aggressive in going after the resistance fighters in these cities, in these camps. They have arrested thousands since October 7th. We're talking about very aggressive, in which they go to these towns. The Palestinian Coordination Security Police Force, they allow them in, they go and arrest people. Sometimes they kill them on the spot. So this has been very aggressive and made more aggressive after October 7th. Also, you have the settlers who go around, because now they've been armed, threatening Palestinians, killing Palestinians, burning their crops, basically wreaking havoc on these. So that's the first thing, which is the security situation. Also, they have embarked on a program in which one way to control the population is to load them with debts. It's the same tactic used against Muslim countries. You give them lots of money, Now they have to work for mortgages and for expenses to pay off their debt. So if they misbehave, then they could be punished in a way in which they will be very difficult to support their families. The majority of Palestinians in the West Bank are government employees. They get salaries. They have been controlling these salaries and even deducting from these salaries. So the Palestinian Authority does not get enough money to pay the salaries, so they pay 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. They can barely live on these kind of salaries, and with the debt that they have incurred, it becomes even more difficult to survive. And then you have to look at the conduct of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority basically is empowered through one of the factions, Palestinian factions, called Fatah. And Fatah itself actually is split between those who would like to do something and those who have been absorbed into this mechanism of the occupation. This part of the faction, led by the current Palestinian Authority president, whose term was expired or had expired in 2010.
Yes.
So now he is...
It's supposed to be election.
Yeah, now he is in his 15th year of his expired term. So they make it very, they punish and reward depending on behavior. So you have the security situation, you have the economic situation, and you have the political situation. All these combined make it very difficult, not impossible. And when some of the resistance movements like Hamas and Jihad tried to do something, the crackdown was coming very hard with the cooperation of the Palestinian security. Yes, they have expelled and made homeless at least 35,000 people in these camps. Now these are families, tens of thousands of them. They are basically in the streets, or they have to find some relatives, or because they have raised the situation. They go to these, and sometimes, as I said, they killed dozens of people. They arrested thousands of people. And they haven't even been part of any negotiations. They have released 250 people from prison, long-term prisons. None of them, or virtually a lot of them, were from periods before October 7th. None of them after. So thousands of people have been after. So it's very difficult security situation with all these added pressures to make it into a popular uprising like it was before or in 2021. And if you add to this the negative policies and the negative reaction of the Palestinian Authority, it becomes even more difficult. On the issue of the Muslim countries, as I said earlier, the question is the balance of power that exists not only in the region but worldwide. Many of these Muslim countries, and you've seen it, you've seen it vividly. How many people saw what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh when Trump was standing up and every Muslim leader coming to shake his hand and take a picture?
Yes.
It can't be more humiliating than that. Here is the person who's actually allowed the genocide to take place.
Not just allowed, send the weapon.
Not only allowed, but also has been a complicit and partner into this, who has been telling them to finish the job. The person who is providing tens of billions of dollars for the occupation, giving them the intelligence, the green light, the protection, diplomatic protection, the veto needed for that. And all these Muslim countries are coming and shaking his hand and embracing him, and it's just unbelievable. A few weeks before that, they were meeting with him, asking him to stop the war, which is the correct position. And then he comes and brings this plan of his, which does not address any notion of Palestinian freedom of liberation. We talked about a little bit about the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2803. And this is very vivid situation. So you have this Security Council resolution that comes, which totally ignores the basic rights of the Palestinians. No right to self-determination, no freedom, no end of occupation, no Palestinian state, not even in the horizon. And they are coming here to disarm the resistance and to bring about a board made of foreigners, the head of which is Trump himself, and saying that this is the board that will rule Gaza. So now we're back to the mandatory situation. It's like we've been back 100 years ago with Herbert Samuel when the British occupied Gaza. And this is not surprising that comes from Trump. What is surprising is that 8 countries come and endorse him and accept it. You know, Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and Pakistan and Turkey and Indonesia. I mean, what is the, so why do they do that? Why are the Muslim and Arab countries doing this? I mean, they come and says because we're trying to stop the genocide. But they have more leverage than simply endorse a situation where Palestinians are denied self-determination and denied agency, and they're trying to achieve through political means what the Israelis could not achieve through political means. No one is talking about the withdrawal of Israel. No one is talking about the establishment of a Palestinian state, or at least a notion that there will be self-determination. If you look at 2803, which is based on Trump's plan, the highest level of achievement, in other words, the ambition is to get to the 2020 plan of Trump. That is contingent upon Palestinians, quote unquote, reforming themselves. What does that mean? They have to change even their curriculum. They have to stop many things in which the Palestinian narrative, what actually happens, the historical evidence that in Nakba, that a catastrophe had taken place, they want to change that. They want to erase it, not only from the curriculum, but also from the memory of the Palestinians. And who's the judge on that? That's Israel, would say, yeah, we're satisfied. That they will condemn resistance. The resistance is terrorism. Who judges that? Israel. If you go through this whole process of what they call reform, then you may get to 2020 plan. And what's 2020 plan? This is a plan that everybody rejected, including the Palestinian Authority, including the Muslim countries. Now this is the horizon, this is the best we can come up with. It is unbelievable. Because the 2020 plan of Trump basically does not give Palestinians any notion of a minimum requirement. It keeps Jerusalem in the hands of Israel as its capital, Golan Heights annexed, the Jordan Valley effectively under the military control of Israel. It does not call for the dismantlement of any settlement blocks, which have already taken over 40% of the West Bank. At best, you're going to end up with Bandustans that have some sort of a relationship with tunnels and bridges. It is not a viable situation. In a demilitarized situation that may take 10 or 15 or 20 years to achieve. This is not the plan. And with all the sacrifices of the Palestinians, that is the plan that Muslim countries are looking for. The questioner asked, why can't the 57 countries supplant the United Nations and become effectively the UN part to the Muslim countries? And goes back to the question I raised and the answer I gave. Because we're not independent. Because, see, America uses 2 strategies to control the countries and their people. One for rich countries and one for poor ones or developing ones. For rich countries, they tell them that they have to sell their oil using the dollars. And then they need to put the excess amount of that money into American economy with very limited access to it. So if they try to defy American policy, they will pay dearly, because that money could be taken away from them. It's no longer their money, particularly that it's in dollars. They did that to Russia after it invaded Ukraine. They took $600 billion.
They did also to Muammar Gaddafi, because Muammar.
And yeah, Muammar Gaddafi, basically no one knows where that money went. It's gone. Almost 40 billion that no one knows where it went. And then for poor countries or developing countries, they load them with debt. I don't know how much Indonesia has a debt.
We are really up to here with that, isn't it? Yeah. Like goose, we never going to pay goose, isn't it? Yeah. We are that higher with that problem.
I mean, one of the Muslim countries has a debt of $550 billion. $550 billion. It's not even a government debt, it's mostly private debt, but they allow it from European and American banks. It's very difficult then, because they give you a 10-year period before you start paying the principal. You just pay interest. And then if that money is invested inside the country where it does not produce foreign currency, it becomes a burden. Now you have to bring in enough foreign currency in order to pay it back. It becomes very difficult. So they tell you, if you're going to defy American policy or you try to do something outside what we can allow you, we will crush your economy. Many Muslim countries are under this situation, assuming that they want to do something for Palestine. Many of them actually goes against Palestine. Now you have some Arab countries saying that we will not pay a penny or $1 for the rehabilitation and reconstruction of Gaza unless you disarm the resistance. They go and collaborate with the Zionists. We saw, for example, when Israel had a strike against Iran, and Iran retaliated with missiles, that you had some regional countries putting their fighters and radars and air defense systems and trying to knock down and defend the Israeli state. I mean, you could see that you have a problem. When Muslim countries came together, some of the countries inside, they were defending, and they refused actually to do anything that would threaten any kind of a real action against the Israeli genocide. They would not even withdraw their ambassadors. They would not try to use any kind of leverage like sanctions or suspension or even any of action worldwide, none of that. So we have problem. We have real problems. And add to that, of course, not only the leverage that the Americans have and the division within the Muslim countries, the economic debt, but on top of that, we have a problem with how they perceive the relationship between the imperialists, the colonizers, and the colonized. They come on the part or on the side of the colonizer. And therefore, any popular movements, any religious-based movements, it becomes a threat to these regimes, because they believe that their interests lie with the interests of the colonizers. So in short, it's very difficult to bring about any real change with the current composition, even though we have the potential to do a lot, but there is no consensus. Now, in the issue of the media, the first question that Nabil raised, which is, what can we do with the media? What would be our role? And here I said, the media is the first medium by which people can be influenced. This is what they hear, particularly when we talk about mass media. And of course, mass media, when we're talking about these big conglomerate corporations, the commercial media or legacy media, however you want to describe it, they are being controlled. They are controlled for the most part by people who have interests in in the propaganda of the Zionists, and you see that they have controlled the air space for a long, long time. That has been, in a major way, shifted with the Gaza war. They still have lots of influence, but at least we could see that there are alternative media, particularly on social media, in which now the perception has been changed. So it's very important to understand the role of the media in how it impacts, influences the perception of peoples around the world. And I think they're trying to catch up this, and they're having difficulty. That's why they go and try to buy TikTok. That's that they will censor all kinds of platforms, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, other means. But still, even with all these attempts, they haven't been able to shut down. And I think it's irreversible. It's very difficult. Now we have lots and lots of even people and movements and civil society organizations who are openly criticizing the influence of the Zionist movement. So you as youth, there are a lot you could do. Not only you could try to have a massive awareness campaign on these issues. Lots of people under 30, we have polls now that prove this, that substantiate this, that they are overwhelmingly with Palestine over the Israeli, Palestine over the Israeli narrative. But we could also monitor. We can shut down. We can echo these attempts. We can start random or rather rapid response teams. So whenever you see these lies coming, because they also come with campaigns, we can immediately respond to them. Like this hoax that there were rapes on October 7th with zero evidence, that there were babies in the ovens with zero evidence. All these things, they can immediately be repudiated or refuted so that people know the truth. And we can start talking about what's actually happening on the ground in Palestine rather than having these lies and fabrications going through. We can monitor reports that come, planted stories. Like when the New York Times has this story about things which, when you read it, the headline says one thing, but the actual thing is different. And I also want to warn you about Zionist influences inside your own societies, because they plant these things so that they can also brainwash different people. So you need to start looking into Zionist influences in the media and other places inside your own, and you start putting their feet to the fire. You start responding to them, isolating them, exposing them, showing people the real truth in all aspects, not only in the narrative or in the media coverage of the story, but also in all these political positions. Now, most people are not experts on Palestine, and most of them do not understand the history. They sympathize with Palestinians. They sympathize with victims. But we need also to educate ourselves. So when you talk from a position of knowledge rather than from a position of simply a sympathizer. So when you're reporting, you have to go back again to the origin, to the roots of the conflict, rather than from the effects of it. So when we talk about, again, Zionism, we have to know what is Zionism and how do they act and what do they do. And more importantly also, your own national security. As I said, this is not a foreign policy issue. This is not simply about Palestine, it's also about your own country. They are trying to drag you in, not only to recognize Israel, but also to embrace it, to accept it, to accept their narrative, to accept their version of what is actually happening. Because Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country, so having that into their column adds heft to their strategy. So your position, you're not just like any other country. There are many, many Muslim countries. But the reason they want Indonesia and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan right now, that's the focus, is because they add tremendously to the Israeli narrative. And therefore you have a particular mission here, and that is you should not allow this. So what do? They employ certain people within your own society so that they can brainwash you, they can impact you, they can influence you, they can change their behavior or make it a non-issue. This is a national security issue, I believe, for Indonesia itself, as it is for Pakistan and Turkey and others. So it becomes crucial for you to be active on this, and again, look at it not simply as a help or assistance to the Palestinians, but it is something, regardless of your ideology, that this is something that you have to embrace because it's the right thing to do. It's a justice issue, and it's also a national security issue against your own national security, and it's for the peace and justice of the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you. Kang Harun mau menambahkan sedikit tentang 57 negara yang ditanyakan tadi sama titik-titik.
Iya, saya ingin menambahkan sedikit ya berdasarkan hasil temuan di lapangan. Tadi kan Teteh bilang ya, kok kayaknya susah 57 negara Muslim menandingi PBB gitu kan Teh. Sebenarnya yang dilawan itu bukan PBB-nya Teh. Ini sekedar informasi aja. Jadi saya pernah, yang tadi saya cerita, saya ke Al-Arian ya, dimana kalau misalnya kita berpikir tadi 57 negara Muslim tuh besar kan, kenapa sih tidak bisa mendesak itu kan untuk bisa truk-truk bantuan kemanusiaan itu untuk dikirim langsung ke Gaza atau lancar lah gitu, tidak ada kendala. Jangankan kita Teh 57 negara Muslim misalnya yang sangat kuat ini, saya mendapat informasi di Sinai Utara itu di gudang, bahkan PBB saja susah masuk ke Gaza. Itu loh, petinggi PBB Teh, ini off the record-nya saya dapat, untuk masuk ke Gaza aja susah. Jadi yang kita lawanin bukan kita mendani 57 negara dengan PBB, bukan, tapi ada sebuah kekuatan besar. Ada dua negara mungkin Amerika dan Israel ini yang kuat gitu loh, berkoalisi untuk supaya kepentingannya itu di Gaza Palestina ini tidak diganggu gitu. Jadi bukan 57 negara dan PBB gitu. Jadi kita 57 negara ini sedang melawan Israel gitu. Dan bagaimana sulitnya. Saya juga, dan satu lagi Teh, apakah Indonesia berani? Ini fakta di lapangan. Saya misalnya sebagai aktivis relawan Global Sumut Flotilla misalnya, ketika kami ke Tunisia, apakah kami mohon maaf ya, ada sebuah upaya misalnya mendukunglah misalnya di awal misalnya, ini di awal ya, bukan setelah sudah ramai gitu ya. Kami berangkat saja, adakah perwakilan dari negara Indonesia?
Pas mau berangkat nggak ada.
Oke.
Pas mau berangkat ya?
Saat kami di Tunisia saja itu sangat hati-hati semuanya, dubes gitu kan. Entah ada apa gitu loh dengan gerakan. Selalu kalau gerakan-gerakan yang mendukung Palestina itu, menurut saya pribadi nih, pendapat saya pribadi, mungkin peran negara dalam hal ini pemerintah Republik Indonesia menurut saya masih kecil ya. Menurut saya pribadi ya, karena masih kayaknya tuh disembunyikan. Ada apa sih gitu loh, ada apa gitu dengan Indonesia tidak mau bersuara. Mungkin teman-teman melihat perbedaannya seperti di Malaysia misalnya, itu kan terlihat beda gitu loh. Dan rasa kita nih sebagai jurnalis tuh pengen bantuan dari teman-teman semua. Ayo kita kritisi kebijakan pemerintah Indonesia ini supaya lebih tegas lagi, lebih kuat lagi gitu. Jangan sembunyi-sembunyi. Jangan-jangan, mohon maaf ya, mungkin ada kepentingan besar gitu, sehingga takut bersuara gitu pemerintah Indonesia. Kita kan iya, kita nggak tahu kepentingannya apa. Nah, makanya untuk supaya bisa membuat negara, minimal negara kita deh nggak usah berbicara 57 negara tadi yang tergabung dalam OKI ya teh. Minimal Indonesia kita desak lah pemerintah kita agar lebih kuat lagi bisa bersuara gitu. Emang teman-teman puas dengan pidato dari pemerintah Indonesia di PBB kemarin? Kan ada juga yang pro kontra teh. Ada yang misalnya
keren banget.
Ya, ada yang mengapresiasi, ada juga yang mengkritisi gitu kan. Jadi kan seolah-olah ini Indonesia ini masih, menurut saya pribadi sebagai jurnalis, masih belum tegas. Dan saya pun mengalami ketidaktegasan itu di lapangan gitu loh. Ketika kami melakukan peliputan misalnya,
nggak usah kita bahas ketidaktegasan.
ketika misalnya kita peliputan di lapangan misalnya, gitu kan?
Di Tunisia maksudnya mau
Enggak usah Tunisia lah. Ya. Contoh ketika saya mengirimkan bantuan, mengawal pengiriman bantuan kemanusiaan ke Gaza, seolah ada larangan-larangan misalnya. Jangan. Oke. Kan kalau saya kan orangnya agak-agak nakal ya, misalnya saya udahlah berani walaupun dimarahin itu kan. Jadi kayak seolah tuh menjaga supaya hubungan ini supaya terjaga dengan baik. Padahal kan tujuan kami sebagai jurnalis misalnya ingin mereportase fakta gitu loh, supaya masyarakat Indonesia itu tahu kondisi realnya gitu. Itu pengalaman-pengalaman yang sebenarnya juga menjadi kritik buat pemerintah agar lebih tegas sih dari sisi tadi ya. Jadi soal tadi misalnya hal sepele aja kan, kita gerakan GSM misalnya ketika pelepasan apa ada pemerintah? Kan nggak ada.
Janjinya sih ada tapi nggak ada.
Nah itu kan fakta, bukan hoax loh. Itu fakta. Kami merasakan sendiri sebagai relawan Global Support gitu. Jadi ya mudah-mudahan nih nggak cuman kami, teman-teman semua nih bergerak. Barangkali dengan upaya gerakan dan suara teman-teman bisa merubah posisi atau ketegasan dari pemerintah Republik Indonesia untuk terus keras membantu perjuangan masyarakat Palestina.
Oke, langsung closing statement aja boleh kan?
Ya kalau dari kami, dari saya pribadi sebagai jurnalis, intinya teman-teman saya minta tolong jangan berhenti dan teruslah berkarya membuat konten-konten perjuangan rakyat Palestina. Bantu perjuangan rakyat Palestina dengan membuat sebuah konten-konten yang menarik gitu, supaya tidak pernah hilang dan terus bersuara gitu. Jangan pernah takut selama apa yang disuarakan teman-teman terkait Palestina itu adalah fakta, bukan hoax. Berkarya bisa lewat apa aja ya, nggak cuma di media sosial. Intinya itu sih.
Terima kasih. And probably from Prof, the closing statement for our young people, closing statement maybe. Maaf ya yang dua penanya waktunya udah habis. Ya, mohon maaf. Yes, please, Prof.
I think it's very important to note that this is a crucial moment in history, in the history of the struggle against the Zionist movement and the Zionist state, the Zionist regime, that we've gone through many phases, and this is probably where the struggle is becoming global, and that means everybody would have to contribute to that struggle. And I talked briefly about how I foresee the end of this struggle. That means what would be the horizon. I don't think the world, or the Palestinians for that matter, would be able to accept a Zionist regime that is with these features, being racist, supremacist, settler, colonial expansions, and so on and so forth. This is so unjust and unacceptable. And therefore, our solution must be based on justice, on law, on freedom, on these values, self-determination, liberation, the right of people to live in the places where they belong. That is not going to come simply through demand. It needs the struggle to be a global struggle for this to happen. Because if Israel is allowed to exist, as I said earlier, it will only exist because it is able to subject all other countries, all other states, all other people to its whim, to its desires, to its policy of hegemony. It will try to break up, as we have seen in Syria. Syria changed regimes. And this current regime says, I do not seek a fight with Israel. And yet it has taken all its capabilities and it's trying to break it up into 4 different countries. In Sudan, Sudan got its independence on January 1st, 1956. Within a year, they created a unit within the foreign ministry, within the Mossad, to break up Sudan. In fact, in 2010, it was broken up into south and north. Now they try to break it up into Darfur region. All these things, they're trying to break up all these countries, were actually written in a document published in 1982. It's called the Oded-Yunan Plan, ODED. YINON, the Oded-Yunan, YINON plan, in which they're trying to break up the whole regime, the whole system, the whole order. And when Netanyahu talks about a new Middle East, that's what he means. He wants to strip all the capabilities, all the power from all the countries, because every country in their twisted perception is a threat to the Zionist state, because they know they stole the land, they know they dispossessed the people, and the only way to continue this control and hegemony is through dispossessing people. That's why they insist that Hezbollah must disarm, and Syria must be weak, and Lebanon must be weak, and all other countries must have the resources or the ability to challenge them. That's why Egypt has to be isolated through Camp David with limited sovereignty, and so on and so forth. So the only situation here is we have to deal with this ideology and then with this regime by dismantling these structures which call for that, because it's a threat to everybody's national security. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by understanding their power and try to deal with it. So your job as youth, as the future of Indonesia, is to identify Zionist influence, Zionist institutions, foreign interference, and try to seek them out and try to eradicate them and gain back your independence and your sovereignty and support this just struggle of Palestine.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Wah, kerja keras ya. Ada tugas luar biasa dari Prof kepada para pemuda Indonesia. Karena dia tidak hanya menjadi ancaman bagi Palestina, dia juga ancaman bagi kita. Kalau kita ingat Black Rock dan Antara dan lain-lain ya, insya Allah dibahas nanti secara detail pada siang hari. Terima kasih banyak. Thank you very much Prof and Kang Harvin. And by this we conclude the session and then we will give the session back to the MC. Thank you. Yes, Prof.
Sorry, Mr. Prof Sami and Mr. Harvin. You.
I think we are supposed to.
Yes. Please. Oke. Terima kasih kepada Dr. Maimun, Pak Harvin dan juga Prof Sami atas diskusinya yang luar biasa ya, Masya Allah. Dan setelah ini kita akan melaksanakan sesi pemberian cindera mata yang akan diberikan oleh Ketua Pelaksana Al-Aqsa Awareness Week. Mangga kepada tenor.
Enggak usah, tenor aja. Oh, oke. Cindera mata.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Foto dulu. Oke, Teteh ikut.
Foto? Mana yang petanya?
Oke, terima kasih kepada tenor. Dan terima kasih juga kepada Prof Sami. Pak Harvin, dan juga Teh Maimun yang telah memimpin jalannya diskusi kita pada hari ini. Masya Allah, tadi luar biasa sekali ya ilmu yang telah kita dapatkan, dan itu menjadi starter awal terutama untuk teman-teman peserta leadership training setelah ini. Dan karena hari ini, saat ini kita telah mencapai sesi terakhir dari agenda seminar, sebelum menutup agenda, marilah kita mengakhirinya dengan pembacaan doa yang insya Allah akan dibawakan oleh Kang Hilmi.
Ada Pak Juliandri.
Oke, pembacaan doa insya Allah akan dibawakan oleh Ustadz Juliandri, dosen Fakultas Matematika dan Ilmu Pengetahuan Alam, jurusan Kimia, Universitas Pajajaran. Mangga kepada Ustadz Juliandri, waktu dan tempat dipersilahkan.
My husband.
Sungkan.
Sini aja ya. Oh, di sana. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Bagian terakhir insyaallah kita sama-sama bermunajat kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala agar kita semua diberikan kesempatan untuk bisa menjadi barisan-barisan yang terdepan dalam perjuangan membela Palestina. Karena dengan perjuangan-perjuangan inilah kita bisa merasakan hidup yang sebenarnya. Untuk itu mari kita memulai doa kita dengan membaca Al-Quran Al-Fatihah. Al-Fatihah. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin arrahmanirrahim. Maliki yaumiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi rasulillahi ajma'in. Allahumma rabbana ighfir lana dhunubana wa liwalidina warhamhum kama rabbawna shighara wa li jami'il mu'minina wal mu'minat wal muslimina wal muslimat al ahya'i minhum wal amwat fil barri wal bahri ya qadiyal hajat. Allahumma rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Allahumma habib ilana al-iman wa zayyinhu fi qulubina wa karih ilaina al-kufra wal fusuqa wal isyana waj'alna minar rasyidin. Allahumma ansuril islam wal muslimin wa dammir a'da'aka a'da'ad-din. Allahumma 'alaika biz-zalimin. Allahumma 'alaika biman qatala al-mu'minin. Allahumma dammirhum ajma'in. Allahumma ansur ikhwanana al-mujahidin al-mustadafina fi Palestin. Allahumma ansur ikhwanana al-mujahidin al-mustadafina fi Gaza. Allahumma inna nastawdi'uka ahla Gaza wa ahla Palestin wa ahla al-Quds ya rabbana ya rabbal alamin. Allahumma anzil alaihim junudak wa inna junudaka ma fis samawati wal ard innaka ala kulli syai'in qadir. Allahumma inna nad'uka kama amartana fastajib lana kama wa'atana innaka la tukhliful mi'ad. Allahumma ya Allah, berikanlah kekuatan kepada kami menjadi orang-orang yang senantiasa bersyukur kepadamu ya Allah. Berikanlah kami kekuatan untuk senantiasa berbakti kepada orang tua kami ya Allah. Berikanlah kami kesempatan dan kekuatan untuk berjuang di jalanmu ya Allah ya Rabbal Alamin. Jadikanlah kami orang senantiasa peduli kepada saudara-saudara kami yang teraniaya di negeri kami maupun di negeri Palestina yang jauh di sana ya Allah. Allahumma ya Allah, satukanlah hati kami bersama mereka ya Allah. Jadikanlah kami bersama mereka berjuang di jalanmu ya Allah ya Rabbal Alamin. Allahumma ya Allah, kami titipkan saudara-saudara kami yang ada di Gaza, yang ada di Palestina, yang ada di tempat lain kepadamu ya Allah. Engkaulah pelindung mereka, Engkaulah yang menggerakkan hati manusia dan hati makhluk untuk membantu mereka ya Allah. Allahumma ya Allah, siapapun yang merencanakan keburukan kepada kaum muslimin ya Allah, kembalikanlah rencana itu kepada mereka ya Allah ya Rabbal Alamin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzabannar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih jazakumullah khair kepada Ustaz Juliandri yang telah membawakan doa. Dengan dibacakannya doa juga sekaligus menutup agenda kita hari ini, dan mungkin sebagai sedikit penutup ya teman-teman atas agenda seminar hari ini, aku mau sedikit menyampaikan apa yang Teh Maimun, Dr. Maimun sampaikan di hari pertama AW kemarin. Kalau kita sama-sama mengingat kemarin ketika bagaimana aktivis global Sumut Flotilla diculik dan Italia langsung lockdown negaranya. Padahal majority of them were not Muslims. Kenapa mereka bisa bergerak tanpa komando? Because they learn. karena mereka belajar apa yang sebenarnya terjadi di Palestina. Mereka mengetahui apa yang harus mereka perjuangkan. Maka saat ini, hari ini kita hadir di sini, semoga menjadi salah satu wujud ikhtiar kita untuk menjadi orang-orang yang juga belajar, dan semoga segera Allah sampaikan kita kepada barisan terdepan dari pembebas Palestina. Oke, mungkin kita cukupkan untuk agenda seminar hari ini. Aku Aska sebagai MC pamit undur diri. Mohon maaf apabila masih